I went to the UFC event on Saturday night. It was
Hmm.
UFC 297. We have two new
Oh.
champions in Dricus du Plessis and Raquel Pennington winning the vacant bantamweight championship.
Hmm.
Very long night at the Scotiabank Center, Scotiabank Arena, as I correct myself. And there was a press conference afterwards. I stuck around for the press conference.
Oh, you went.
Yes, I decided. I was in the back for most of the show. Got there, and to my surprise, they'd given me like press row access. It's like, wow, I didn't get press row access back in the day. And
Hmm.
here we are, how far we have come way. So look at that. Uh, thought, man, this is wonderful. But for the purposes of my own work, I stayed in the back for the whole show because we were getting the rotation of fighters to get the winners. It's way different than when we had to do like the free for all scrums. Now
Hmm.
it's the same as the format as you saw at Media Day, where and anyone that like watches the post show stuff, you would know the format. They bring you to the desk. Everyone pretty much gets a chance to speak, and you can get in more than like one question. It was a really good setup with all of the fighters. Unfortunately, for like if you're coming at it from the Canadian angle, outside of Jasmine Jasdavicius and Jillian Robertson, the men like went 0-4 for the whole night. Like all the male Canadian fighters lost. So I think that kind of took the air out of the sails of some at the Scotiabank Arena, including Mike Malott, who was on his way to winning this fight with Neil Magny, and then boom, the last couple of minutes, Neil Magny turned it around, finished Mike Malott, and that was it. So that was your UFC report.
Anything else eventful happen?
Oh, let me go through this. So we then go to the press conference with Dana White, and Dana White came in and took some of his questions, and then I got my question in way. And I came in, I wanted to get to like a series of topics, and I'm going in with the impression that it's probably going to be like one question and you got to hand off the mic. But then I'm seeing throughout the night, it seems like the format is you can get some follow ups in here too. So I kind of had a couple at it in mind that I wanted to get to. And so, yes, I wanted to address like the Sean Strickland story from earlier in the week. I felt that was the biggest story of the week when it came
Mhm.
to the actions that occurred during fight week. And I thought that we covered it quite a bit. And I
Mhm.
thought it was like only fair that we get, essentially what I wanted to ask was basically, is there a line? There was a time in the UFC when this kind of stuff was actively discouraged. You might remember years ago when Nate Diaz just used a homophobic slur on Twitter and was fined for doing that. And you could not imagine that happening now.
Matt Mitrione
Matt
talking about
Mitrione
Fallon
was
Fox.
another. So obviously, like it has shifted
Mhm.
the mindset of Dana White and the UFC. That has shifted, and I think we saw that in a really ugly form on Wednesday. And I mean, I was like genuinely asking, not as just a like, believe me, I was not going into this with the idea of like some confrontational situation, but as I mentioned, I went over a bunch of this on the UFC review, but I imagine many people listening to this probably have not heard that. Is that we were only a month removed from Leon Edwards and Colby Covington. And in the days before that fight, Colby Covington made a really ugly line referring to Leon Edwards' deceased father. And that really struck people in a bad way. Like that was for many people, not everyone. Believe me, I have learned there's a wide range of acceptability. But even Dana White noted when asked about it that, yeah, that was like something he wasn't crazy about. Not to the point that he is like going to, stop anyone from doing anything, but he voiced his own discomfort with that level. So I genuinely asked with the idea of this is not Sean Strickland going on his Twitter account. This is not Sean Strickland doing a third party interview. This is Sean Strickland at a UFC event that is taking the time out to go on a rant, a homophobic rant, a transphobic rant. And I mean, even if you want to be someone that feels that when it comes to fight promotion, there are no rules and there are no topics that are off limits, if you like, this was not even that. It is not as though he was going off on some rant related to Dricus du Plessis. This was totally separate from that. This was like, if we want to go back to the Colby Covington line, and again, I thought that was just gross, that line to Leon Edwards. But if Colby Covington wins that fight, a part of that narrative would be that he rattled Leon Edwards. And even in defeat, part of the story was that Leon Edwards acknowledged that that line really bothered him. And he had to channel all of this anger to put forward a performance like he did against Colby Covington. This was like not even like you, and I'm looking at like the most to anyone that would just feel like, hey, when it comes to fight promotion, nothing is off limits. Like, this was totally separate from that, of someone just using their time at a UFC event to project those views. And I mean, I feel like I got my answer from Dana White in the sense that there is no line. And I think everyone does have a line. I think even Dana White has a line, and we won't know it until it's crossed, but I think it exists. I think you could come up with horrific examples that I can't fathom that they would be okay with that. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm giving too much credit. But I mean, that was my belief, was like in the midst of it all, that like that was the gist of what I was trying to get at. But obviously, I felt in the moment that I stepped on a landmine with the like, I gave him the leash word, and thus it totally, to me, took away any chance at a meaningful answer or discussion, because boom, he pounced on it, and he was very effective in doing that. And it totally shifted the focus to that one word, and that became the focus of it. So, I mean, in the midst of it, it's like I've got his answer, and then I wanted to get to my follow-ups too. I didn't want to like turn this into just, we're just going to argue here back and forth. I clearly see what his view is. But I also, like, I've spoken enough about this. I also want to know your thoughts of just how I presented it, and if you thought it was fair or unfair, or however you felt it was.
I thought it was more than fair. Yeah. And maybe that's probably not going to be surprising to you. Your job is to talk about the news. Your job is to talk about the most talked about stories. And without a doubt, to my perspective at least, that was the most talked about story going into this event, UFC 297. It'll probably be, well, maybe outside of like the title changes, to somebody like me who doesn't even watch the fights anymore, but follows mainstream news outlets like an ESPN or a CBC. This is the story of UFC 297. So for you to bring it up and to get the boss's perspective on it was completely and 100% fair. It was you doing your job, and you did your job. That's how I feel about it. And then him, like, Dana latching onto a word, you just kind of come to expect, that sort of thing, right? He's
very good at
very
that.
good.
Like, in terms of just like, I'm not one that's like, regretful. I think that it is like,
well, if it was in this word, it would have been another word.
That's what I feel it would have been. It would have been something else. That it's just, you took something and shut it down. And in the moment, I'm just thinking like, you can't possibly think I'm being literal here. Like, please tell me you don't think I'm being literal here from somebody that, the UFC produces a show called UFC Unleashed. Like, we know that's not literal, correct? Like, I'm not advocating for literal leashes on people. That's what I felt like in the moment, and that seems to be what people were angered by. Which I mean,
the interpretation
at that level.
The interpretation was like a feeling of control, as if like Dana
controls the fighters,
controls what they say.
Well, he definitely doesn't control what they say. But if you are someone that was offended by me insinuating that the UFC has control over these fighters, boy, do I have an antitrust lawsuit for you coming April 15th.
Well, again, just by judging, Dana's own words himself from the past, there's precedent set for, a limit on the free speech that he seems to be so proud to promote right now.
They they took away flags for a time not all that long ago. I mean, certainly you're going to have that, and that's all I state is that at the core, I was not even coming at this with sort of the like the political side of this whole argument, which I understood that is what this was going to be disseminated and pieced up into. I fully get that of what I was stepping into, but at its core, this is also a business that is being run. And is this bad for business? I think you could make actually a pretty significant argument that this has not deterred UFC's business at all. If in fact you had a packed arena on Saturday that treated Sean Strickland as by far the biggest star on that card, and that is an observation in and of itself. That, and believe me, I have seen the fallout of this in that there is a giant, or at least a super loud base that is clamoring for this, that feels their rights are under attack, that their ability to say and feel anything is under attack. And I'm just trying to understand that more because we have seen that shift in the UFC, and they are dining in this area and doing exceptionally well by it. And you would think one of the questions that preceded me was any fallout over this from broadcasters, sponsors, and Dana White. If you take his word for it, there was none. So they are on board with this sport, the culture that it has embraced, and that has become a feature, not a bug.
Could I play a clip from Dana from the past talking about the Matt Mitrione story and his stance on free speech at the time?
If you have a clip.
I mean, this kind of was brought up, and I do think maybe the story here is the shift in philosophy. So let's play this clip.
You know, I know that there was a lot of talk, free Mitrione and all this stuff with the fans, and it's freedom of speech and all this stuff. That's absolutely ridiculous. Work at any company anywhere in America and go out and say ignorant, stupid stuff publicly. Even on top of that, say it publicly in a big, place where people can go read it or hear it publicly and see what happens to you, And
so that was a clip from years ago, stepping off of, I guess, controversial statements Matt Mitrione, UFC heavyweight, made about Fallon Fox, transgendered UFC fighter, and Dana White commenting on, I suppose, his stance on that level of free speech at that time. So what changed, and when did it change? And
I think that's the end. And no one is, prohibited from changing their views. Whether you agree with them or not is separate, but you are allowed to change your views and your opinions over time. And there's been a stark difference when you hear that clip and juxtapose it to, you would never in a million years hear Dana White uttering that now. Like this is a cause. This is a philosophy that has been adopted. And I mean, even if you want to go closer to the pandemic, like there was not all that long ago that Dana White was stating, you tune into a UFC broadcast, you're not getting any of these politics, you're not getting any of that stuff that you're going to see out there. You tune in for the fights, and that's what you're going to get here. And that we're only talking about 2020 to now as well. So it seems to be as though we are, and UFC will or Dana White, I should be specific, like espouses that, like, we're not about politics here. Well, it's like, you're not about a certain brand of politics, but this has become very political in terms of what the UFC stands and represents for. And it is too, they are the shining light in terms of that, their sport, their industry being an outlet for the promotion being an outlet for this.
But to me, just as an outsider looking in, there's been a very clear shift in perhaps the UFC's policies when it comes to something like this over the past several years. And I'd love to get more information on it. And that's exactly what I think you were trying to do on Saturday. And I have all the respect in the world for you, to even step into that dimension, knowing the type of, blowback that you would receive.
Yeah. And like, again, I think most people know, like, I sincerely do not covet this attention. I don't like being the focus of any kind of news story. I understand you
don't want to be a poster boy for woke leftist, soy boys everywhere.
I've got to say, like, I was talking to someone this morning, and it was like, what do you gain from this? And what I gain from this is like this is a very unique experience to be kind of in the middle of this. So it's like, what can I learn from this? And it's like, I might sound like a total nerd to some people, but like, I'm literally like studying like the titling of like the videos, like how they're worded, how they are. Like I'm learning all this as I go, but man, I handed them like media reporter #1, woke, Canadian on top of it. Dude, this is manna from the heavens for these like ultra right leaning like
American
channels that are
and Canadian sources too.
And they do tremendous, not like the numbers attached to this are gigantic. Like that, like it is such a gigantic system that like I'm content that's being farmed. So it's really hard for me to take any of this too personally. It's like, again, I asked this question and I'm not a dummy, at least not as much as people might assume today. Like I know what I'm putting myself into. So whenever I put that out, whatever comes back at me is on me. I will totally wear that. It's like I only say this because literally I got texts from people like checking in to like, are you okay? And all that told me was, man, it's got to be really bad. If like I got multiple like wellness texts from people of like, dude, how are you holding up? Are you okay? Very nice of people. I will say of everyone and I got some very nice messages. Chris Elliott sent me like the most heartwarming thing that I won't share the contents of. It was private, but I will take something like that a million times more than any of the comments, the hatred. Leash boy, I actually get a chuckle out of leash boy. I'm okay with that, but like I totally own. You know, I'll paraphrase, okay, and then we will move on. I know people don't want to hear all of this. I will take most of the blame for like my word choice with Dana, because some people were like, "What were you thinking in the middle of that?" And sometimes you are struggling. Way you'll know this when you're in the midst of something and you're looking for the right word. And
we've done podcasts where, like you just freeze.
Sometimes you just say the wrong word, and sometimes I've got like just a reflex of something that was recent in my mind. So in that moment, as I was searching for that word, let's take me into the mind of John Pollock and a conversation I've been having recently with one of my friends about our kids. And this is what I was thinking. She goes down the stairs as my wife is like locking the door. She runs across the street.
God, terrifying.
Scares the out of me. Even hearing this after the fact when she's home and fine, it scares the hell out of me of being downtown. And
do you have leashes for your kids?
No, I feel that's really inhumane, but I had one when I was a kid. Like, my parents literally had like me and my brother on a leash.
Yeah. I'm starting to like really understand and maybe enjoy the idea of doing something like that, because it's like, I mean, for me though, it's just again about their safety. That clip, courtesy of woke leftist Canadian podcaster Wei Ting on the most recent edition of Pollock and Ting Talk, available in the Post Wrestling Cafe.
So again, I'll own 98% of this, but at least 2% I'm going to blame on Wei for putting that in my head. So close.
I mean, out of context, I feel like that clip sounds way worse than really anything you might be attached to. But it's very good pull, John. Wow.
Anyway, well, it's I knew I had to like address this and talk about it, folks. It's like my last thing. I don't want to like be preachy here, but like, for anyone that like this would be like a smaller number of people that might watch this and be like, God, I never want to ask a tough question because that might happen to me.
Gotcha. Right.
Do not be deterred by that. Like, please. It's like, this is minimal in the grand scheme of things.
We got clarity on Dana's thoughts on the story. You got something out of it. You know?
Folks, I can only tell you, like, and I'm being completely honest, if after talking all about that last week, and here I have the microphone and the ability, like, how many people have the chance to have a conversation with the person that is the head of the company who's staring right at me? And if I had just punted and just gone with a safe question instead, I promise you, I would have got none of the negative feedback, but believe me, I would have felt awful. I would have felt worse than anyone would have. Like, these comments are like nothing. It's white noise, and I will be yesterday's news by whenever they get tired of me, which I'm a very boring person. They will move on.
I mean, if we're valuing free speech, reporters should feel the right to ask whatever they want.
Yeah, no, I had people like, oh, what'll happen to your credentials? Like, guys, I have no concern about credentials, nor do I want people to even think like that is some like threat that I have. For all I know, I'm perfectly welcome to return. And if not, I'm not. Like, that is not that should not be in your space at all.
When was the last time you went to a UFC event as press?
It's been years.
And we've existed more than fine. Like, we don't even need WWE or AEW credentials to do this job. It's meaningless to us. It's nice to have. It's nice to provide extra content from a different perspective, but it's meaningless for our jobs.
I'll tell you, some of these YouTube channels, they want to make sure I'm credentialed from now until the end of time. Okay,
oh, you got some. Yeah,
they
you
want
got
me
some
on the
good
road.
shit.
Okay, every single month, they want me at these events.
Yeah.
The toughest thing on Sunday actually was, you know what time I got out of that arena on Sunday night? Saturday night, I should say.
Dude. Like, must have been 2:30.
3:35. I left the arena after that press conference. That's how late it went.
Wow.
So I got out there, cabbed it home, and then I went to bed at 4:30, and then woke up at 8 a.m. And that was the least woke I had been all weekend. That's it. That's all my material. That's all I got.